some of these lessons were very difficult for me to learn. It was almost too late. Only now I understand.
The world's foremost expert on human movement,
the one and only Ido Portal.
Incredible movement genius.
The man who never really claims to be the master. And
his approach also transcends athletics.
I'm working with Conor McGregor as a movement expert.
I was already in Brazil when I was 15 for the first time, getting into fights.
It's a tactical game that people from outside completely misunderstand.
People die in capoeira every year. We rub against reality. We rub against each other.
I tasted a different culture, a different way to look at things.
It's a cultural manifestation.
It was very early on, so it kind of almost merged with my own identity. These were huge lessons.
Well, I thought I was into the martial arts, period, but then I discovered it was more the movement inside martial arts that was actually my passion.
Learning rhythm and music and expression.
Capoeira is not just a martial art.
It can be a fight, but it can be a dance.
To become the best version that I can within capoeira, I started to look for more and more tools. Capoeira started to open my mind to movement, to the concept of movement.
I got to know Ido Portal when I was about 13, and we shared the same capoeira master. Ido expresses so well the vastness of capoeira, the complexity that people have a hard time to understand.
What was the first thing that got you from that transition from martial arts to let's open this up, let's make it bigger?
Let's say capoeira was the transition, but I didn't realize it until 15 years into it. Because capoeira is not just a martial art, which you can say it about almost any martial art in a way. They all go into some kind of its own niche, specialized thing. We call them martial arts and we treat them as the same thing, but they're really not. Some of them are extremely cultural. Some of them are extremely about the ritual. Some of them are very much about efficiency within a specific scenario. Others, efficiency somewhere else. Others are more sport-like and affected by that. And capoeira is a cultural manifestation that includes, it's a tactical game. Most of the time, it is some kind of a game that people from outside completely misunderstand and misjudge. And then it can take on moments of fighting, moments of dancing. It's always expressive. It can take moments of theatricality. And capoeira started to open my mind to movement, to the concept of movement, to rhythm, movement, your voice, body, and then later on, as I was trying to become the best version that I can within capoeira, I started to look for more and more tools, and that pulled me outside of capoeira because the field doesn't contain certain pieces of information. For example, a fighter doesn't have the information how to stay healthy within fighting. You need to go search elsewhere.
If you're getting into capoeira or pretty much any other martial art that requires more than just using your hands or just using your feet, the most common problem that people have that you most likely will face is that you will probably have a very hard time coordinating your hands with other parts of your body. For example, you will most likely have problems timing your hand attacks to your kicks or takedowns, or you'll have a problem developing the right instincts for what to do next. To help you fix or entirely avoid this problem, I've made a totally free guide that you can find in the description of this video. Try it out yourself and see how effective it is. Next, Ido talks about one of the strongest features of capoeira culture, which is relationships through movement. As a student of Mestre Dan, I can deeply understand Ido's way, how he became who he is, and why athletes like Conor McGregor want to train with him. Here is sharing similar experiences to what I had growing as a teenager in Capoeira.
I got into Capoeira, and there I met my first teacher, Paulo. And he was also a part of a lot of different areas of discovery relating to my growing up, becoming a teenager, sexuality, putting on capoeira shows for the public without a shirt on the street, traveling to Brazil, getting into fights, having to, learning to do acrobatics on hard floor, crashing in all these areas, learning rhythm and music and expression. I remember this capoeira show we did in Tel Aviv, in Israel. I was like 16, 15. We're putting on a capoeira roda, and after us there is the Brazilian samba dancers with the feathers, bikinis and stuff. And then when I'm taking the break, I'm like, we're waiting behind the scenes, and then the dancer girls comes in and she yanks off her top and remains, topless. And I'm just like 15 years old. I see, this grown woman with, those boobs out. And so it was just like discovering a lot of different ways. I was already in Brazil when I was 15 for the first time. And since then, went every year. I tasted a different culture, a different way to look at things. It was very early on. So it kind of almost merged with my own identity. These were huge lessons. Then later on, I evolved within the capoeira world, and I met my next teacher, who was my main capoeira teacher, and an amazing figure, Master Idan Harari from Israel, and he taught me a lot of things. He took me on. I used to go sleep in his place regularly, and it is far away from when I live relatively to Israel, and so I used to spend some time there. And he showed me what compassion is, where it plays a role, what it means to be a teacher for people. Some of these lessons were very difficult for me to learn. It was almost too late in some ways. And only now I understand how I could not pick them up so quickly. And sometimes I wished I grew within that scenario to begin with. But, you get what you get. And he's an amazing figure of pedagogy, education, morality, ethics, support, but also technicality, understanding how to construct things and how to place them together. And I learned a lot from him. Then later I met my one of the people I call my teacher.
Next, Ido talks about one of the strongest features of capoeira culture, which is relationships through movement. I had a very funny interaction with Ido when Facebook was a thing. I remember he reacted to a video of me training acrobatic when I was about 15, and he complimented me about my skills, but also tried to give me a hint to look for more unconventional movements and combos. I got to ask him who was his favorite capoeira player, and he told me the best capoeira game he saw was between a human and a dog. Another memory I have of him, when he was teaching movement in Israel, he taught some sort of a course, like a 4-hour thing. At that time, there was no movement culture, and the squat resting practice wasn't commonly known. So in that workshop, we had to be squatting whenever he was explaining what we're going to do next. I remember most of the participants were eventually experiencing some knee pain and weren't able to endure more resting squat.
That friendship and connection made through movement is perhaps the most valuable form of connection.
Yeah, I think it's a product of those practices that are maybe not so aware or not so movement oriented in the open sense. And then you get this sensation with people, but alone we do nothing. So much so that we're never alone. also on the inside, and we will manufacture and produce entities inside. So we're constantly in a dynamic exchange, cultural exchange. And practically, I learned this lesson in Capoeira. It's a cultural manifestation. Things happen within this context. We rub against reality. We rub against each other. And their movement occurs and their insight is to be gained and development happens. Being able to, as you said, remove certain reactivity and to learn to control that volume control over how reactive I am, and in other scenarios, how do I remove this reactivity altogether, is very important for performance and also for our lives, for clear thinking, etc. Because everything is moving through us and is being monitored by us. So everything has the potential to detract us from a certain direction of exploration, and if you're reactive, you're a slave. And it becomes worse and worse and worse. Or as, for example, a fighter or a football player, etc., has to know what to take, what not to take. The fact that you can sense more doesn't mean you should react to it. And the practice helps that by bringing people into these scenarios, but oftentimes disarming them. Like when we were working closely today, and because you have a certain background with boxing or fighting, I can tell you, you are missing some kind of a way to be in that space that is not martial. So you carry a certain tone, although you're a very kind person, but oftentimes you held me without realizing you're holding me with a lot of strength, for example. And it was clear to me you're not fully aware of what is unfolding, and it's just, of course, a question of experience. So to be able to be in this scenario but do something else, which is not geared towards winning, losing, competition, or just being able to play with another person. Like, for example, contact improvisation took that and played with that, and the work of Steve Paxton, for the ones who are not familiar. So this is where I call it the hybrids become very useful. Like we don't, when you are practicing in this open way, you are not bound by a specific rule set or ways of doing things. It can be a fight, but it can be a dance a moment after. Another thing that I learned from Capoeira, the situation is very tricky there, because I've seen kids doing cartwheels in Brazil and scissors fall from their pocket. Why would you go with a scissor in your pocket? Obviously, there is certain intentions. And then at other times you see backflips and beautiful things, but people die in Capoeira every year.
Neck breaks or something.
Kicks to the face, trauma, various violence. I've explored other martial arts and boxing. I was involved with MMA and BJJ, but I tell you the most violent arena is that. Why? Because it's unknown. One moment it's smiles, another moment it's something else, and it's uncontrolled. There is no categories, no weights, and it's a street phenomenon. So you have musical instruments. Sometimes they break it on your head. People don't see that, but you can look online on YouTube and see some of that side of Capoeira, which is actually the day-to-day in Brazil and the reality and how things unfolded. So it's very important to explore many ways of being within different distances and spaces from other people and touched in different ways, and not contextualizing it always in the same way.
Let me know in the comments if you think that people die in Capoeira every year. But what's more important is the point he's touching, talking about the playfulness approach to Capoeira and training. That's the Capoeira mindset.
If you still doubt that Capoeira has a lot to do in the martial arts space,
I mean, I study Capoeira.
Watch Joe Rogan and one of UFC's top 3 fighters discuss, does Capoeira work for MMA?